Welcome to Flat Earth Debate Live. I'm your host Nathan Oakley, and if you are new to this channel, or you've not done so already, then be sure to subscribe, hit the bell notification icon and join button if you'd like to become a Nathan Oakley 1980 channel member and keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. If you would like to support the channel, there is a super chat that runs alongside each of these shows while they are live, and there's also a PayPal, Patreon, crypto and thanks button in the info box below the video. Most importantly, if you'd like to join the discussion, simply mute the page you are currently watching, then click the link in the info box below this video to join the panel and express your views on the nature of Earth. If you do join, please don't swear. If you do, you'll be ejected, and if you are, please don't try to rejoin the stream using sock accounts. You'll be warmly welcome back on the next stream. Please also share the show on social media. Sharing the show obviously increases the live audience, but this in turn increases the chances of a more diverse panel, so please share the show on Facebook and Twitter. Now, we are joined by the Adam Meakin, Righteous Force, Neil Constantino, 10th Man Rising, Brian's Logic, and a whole bunch of people in Discord, so welcome one and all.
Hello, everyone.
Good morning, good morning.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning.
Morning, everyone.
Good morning. Any evidence of a physical
Constantino.
geometric sphere edge horizon, formerly known as the curve of the Earth?
Neil Constantino says no.
Any evidence of axial...
Why
Didn't
does it-
Alberoni solve that problem a long time ago?
Hey, Rebel. Didn't Alberoni solve that problem, did you say?
Yeah.
Not really. He was claimed to be measuring geometry that we're being told on an almost daily basis we can't see and wouldn't expect to see. So no. Further to that, Alberoni measured the height of the mountain for his starting point of his mathematics from a flat plane, with an elevation angle measurement to the mountain, well, two, to get the difference to calculate the height with trig. But ultimately, he's using a flat plane to do so. So no, Alberoni didn't solve any of these problems.
Okay. How did it become a legend that he did? What happened?
Well, it's documented that he did, but it's not really relevant whether or not he did or didn't. The history says that he's measuring a physical geometric sphere edge limitation, tangent point, with a straight line to calculate the R value. But if you can't see the horizon as a tangent point because it's a refracted horizon, never to be seen, geometric horizons aren't ever visible, then you can't derive the R value with that measurement.
Right, but he did measure something, right?
Well, not Earth
He
curve.
measured the distance to horizon, you're saying?
I mean, he measured the horizon, but that's not Earth curve.
And then didn't they say like he was close, like what, 95% close to the so-called actual radius of Earth?
And how'd you get that?
But I don't know. But I'm just astonished as how lucky he was that the weather cooperated.
Yeah, but when you think about that statement, saying you're within 95% of the actual radius, well, how do you get the actual radius to see if he's 95% within it?
I didn't say that. I said so-called actual size.
Sure. But I'm just saying the story's got a flaw in it, because how do you get the 100% accurate one to say it's 95% within it if you can't measure it? There's no way to measure the radius if you haven't got a geometric horizon to measure it with.
All right. I mean, I don't know. I'm just saying what they say. I have no idea. I'm guessing it has something to do with measuring elevation angle to Polaris at what we call equator. You get that number?
Nathan,
Yes, you can
Nathan,
reverse engineer that. So yes, you can talk about the 1 degree of declination and then claim that that's actually 1 degree of a curved surface, but then you're bastardizing the original angle measurement. So if you're taking an angle measurement to Polaris, backing away from it and saying, look, it drops 1 degree, and that's equivalent to what 60 nautical miles. Obviously, you're increasing the radius of that circle as you go further and further away from Polaris, right, with that angle. And you can say that, nah, ignore the fact that that's an angle measurement, 2 straight lines. Let's say that actually it's corresponding with the centre of Earth turning through 1 degree if I presuppose it's a sphere. Well, no, because you would never get the angle to make that bastardization.
Right. It's more of a confirmation bias, right? Whatever the measure they attributed to. What they
Exactly.
presume to be the
Rebel.
shape of Earth.
Exactly. To begging the question fallacy, Rebel. Precisely.
Yeah.
Rebel.
So
Do
it's
you know
been
how
a
you get
while.
the
I did
radius for
not
the globe
hear
Earth?
this.
Hold on, Brian. Just go ahead, Rebel.
Uh,
Round out what you were saying.
No, I was just going on a tangent. It's been a while since I joined you.
Where are
But
you getting that tangent from?
I've watched.
Refracted, mate.
Yeah. But it appears to me you guys still are trying to remove that poison box from inverted pyramid of so-called knowledge and science of the shape of Earth.
Same point again. It's back to
Still-
begging the question, right? You can't go anywhere unless you automatically start with the presupposition that you're dealing with the spherical surface.
Right.
After Brian, I'd like to comment.
Yeah, Brian.
I know what I was going to say doesn't really matter too much now. I was just going to say, if anyone wants to know how to get the radius of the globe Earth, just take any circle and treat it as it has 21,600 minutes of degree around the circumference, which it does. Then treat those minutes of degree as nautical miles, and then just back engineer the radius by dividing it by 3.14, and then dividing the diameter by 2, and you will have a figure of 3440. That would be 3440 in nautical miles, and then just convert that to 3958 and change 3958.09. That will be your globe Earth radius value. But the information to get that 21,600 nautical mile circle started with two corresponding longitude lines that were measured horizontally. Because two corresponding longitude lines are exactly 21,600 nautical miles. So all they did was take any two corresponding longitude lines, something that was measured horizontally with flat Earth elevation angles to Polaris, and just curved them so both ends met. So they basically just hijacked a circle. That's all they did. They hijacked the circle.
And
That's all
Patrick
they
tried to
did.
go over it with those two guys that what was that? The last show Nathan was on.
Chronicle debate.
Right. Wasn't Patrick
Don't know if
trying
he
to
did.
explain that to them?
Well, no, I don't know if he was explaining what I'm explaining. I don't know if he was explaining
Not
that
exactly. He was on the
Yeah.
similar
Whatever.
theme,
Explain.
but no.
I'm lost with numbers. I'm lost with numbers you were giving. It's too
I'll ask the
complicated.
question and then we'll move on from this, I think, Rebel. Any evidence of the R value? Also, if you want a free membership, Godzilla's just gifted 5 memberships. One has gone already. So welcome, Mike808.
And man, get in there.
Well, I was trying to finish up the point, and Nathan's already changed the question.
Well, R value's on the same subject. So any evidence of the R value? We're talking about Al-Biruni, measurements of geometric tangent points. It's the same subject.
The
Yeah,
answer is
but
no.
Yeah, but I was going to bring up Al-Biruni. Al-Biruni, an hour later, or 6 hours later, or even on a different day, with fog or weather conditions, would have derived at a different number, because all he had was his height of the mountain above sea level and a depression angle to the horizon that day for where it was to his eye line.
That's right.
So
That
would
was
it
my point.
change?
That's right. I agree.
And Al-Biruni had no knowledge of refraction. So refraction was never part of Al-Biruni, and yet they credit him for figuring it out.
No, they
Beyond-
need a figure, right? They need a starting point. So it became Alberoni. I'm sure thousands of people measured those angles. Maybe 1,000 years before Alberoni. He's just one guy they picked or conjured. I don't know if he existed truly. I wasn't there. It's
Well, he
basically
may
they
have
needed, they needed a figure to put in the past, so you can't question. And it's like I call it a poison box, right? The poison box that on top of which the whole inverted pyramid of the nature of the world was built upon, and nobody was allowed to question that, or they were assured that it's all solved. You can't look into this box. Trust us. It's the Earth is a sphere, and everybody assumed that they're all right.
They come up with a measurement story. So you say figured. Well, figured isn't going to be enough. You need something in the narrative that's a bit more tangible, a bit more real. And a guy going up a mountain to perform geometry is just that little bit more tangible, right? It adds a sense of realism to the claim. But that's where the inherent flaw with the claim comes from, because to be doing it, he's got to measure physical geometry at a tangent point, because that's what he needs for a triangle. He needs a straight line. And he's never going to get one. He can never ever had one. So, further to that, he's using a flat plane to get his height to start these maths off. So there's several problems, but it almost doesn't matter, because your average normie is not going to think that far when they hear the story of Al-Biruni. They just hear complicated maths, man went up mountain, got R value and he came back down again. Good for him. So he got the R value and he measured it. He did something in physical terms. Therefore, he measured R. So they need that in the story. Just a shame he can't measure R. Can't derive geometric physical tangent points if the horizon's not a physical tangent point. How's that horizon working out for you as a geometric tangent point, Rufy? Not so good, huh? Can I have a bent line to a bent Earth? No, you cannot. It's only been 3 years. Work it out. Any evidence you can have gas pressure without the necessary antecedent of a container to press upon?
Negative. Without the containment, there is no pressure. What is the gas going to press against? The sky?
No, it disperses into that because it's just gaps, isn't it?
Exactly.
Any evidence?
Air. Here's air.
Air?
I'm just taking clue
That's
from
funny.
Josh. Didn't he say air is the evidence?
The question that was posed to him was, what evidence have you got that air is pulled down by gravity? There was a short pause and he went, air. Patrick's response, what? Josh's response, air. Patrick's response, that's not an answer.
And he's right.
But imagine.
Well, I'm going to take Josh's
if-
side on this. Go ahead, Ted.
No, I was going to say, imagine if you believed this, say, all your life. You bought all the suitcase exchanges. Refraction is this, but it's written, suitcase comes, now it's this. All of these things you've built your worldview from. And then you get on a debate show. Of course he's got to say air. What else has he got? But he doesn't realize how bad it sounds and how it can't even.
Go ahead, Rebel. That pause is for you.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, Ted. I was just.
No, I was done.
I don't have to imagine. I was that guy. I'm sure most of us were that guy. We don't have to imagine it. We don't think that far, right? I mean, the level of, the depth at which you guys discussing the subjects is like beyond most people, right? And that's the part I disagree with Nathan about when he says average normie.
But that's the point that you just said is very important to identify. The masses of people aren't that guy. They just, like me, I never fought for it or against it. Once my teacher said, I don't even believe the things, but I have to teach it when I was in my early grade school. So I said, well, if they're just going to teach things and the teacher doesn't believe it, why should I believe anything? So I kind of checked out, meaning they said stuff, threw stuff at me. I saw all this stuff. But it's like, okay, fine, let's go play football. Masses of people hear it, but they don't defend it. They're not caught up. Like these two guys were debating it. Like you would never have had me prior to the flat earth movement debate the globe in any way, shape, or form. If the minute I saw flat earth, because of the Julian Assange 40 pictures of Antarctica video, it just clicked. It was like, I knew it all the time. I told my wife, I go, you're not going to believe this, but I've got to go into this very carefully. In fact, I got to go into it trying to disprove it just so I could have that story that I didn't fall for some internet plot. She goes, what are you talking about? I go, The Earth is flat. It's always been flat.
What'd she say? But anyway, was that guy doing a Brenda? Like, in other words, look up?
Yes,
And just
there was.
assuming that we're in a sphere?
Yes, there was a certain number of intuitive commenters that picked up on what he was actually doing, and don't get me wrong, I did too, in the moment. Which is to say, I assume air is a sphere shaped. It's atmosphere. If you, in the same way we covered in the pre-show with Danny Faulkner, can identify a bait and switch that takes place when they describe things occurring in air, and then subtly drop in the word atmosphere. Well, if you've got those two things being equivocated without you realising, you just assume they're the same thing, then air is atmosphere. Well, what's atmosphere? Well, air in a sphere shape held to Earth by a non-force force that you can think of as a force that isn't actually a force called gravity. Well, if you've got that presupposition in mind, you can just say, well, air. In other words, it's the single shortest begging the question fallacy you can have. And that was how it was identified in the comments. So someone says, well, he's just adept at begging the question. For him, that's an answer. He thinks, well, air explains how air's held to the ground with gravity, because air wouldn't be here, would it? If we didn't, it would be expanding into the sky vacuum. In other words, he's got the whole full explanation and begging the question fallacy all wrapped up just by saying air.
Yeah, that's what he was taught from childhood. Well, never questioned.
Talking to your mic. Rebel, you're not talking into your mic.
How about now?
A bit better. Maybe you're just mumbling.
Oh no, I
Rebel,
probably just
can
touched it.
Rebel, let me ask you a question, because one of our favorite housekeeping...
Just before you do, Tenth, everybody whistle past what I think Rebel was driving at there, although it was subtle. Not just then, but previously. He's basically saying, look, if you're an anti-quantum mechanics guy, but clueless, and you go and talk to a quantum physicist about an experiment he's trying to perform or has performed, and the quantum physicist explains it in detail back to the person who's a detractor, but the detractor's crap for brains doesn't understand anything, then the quantum physicist is just going to be talking over the head of the guy that's critical of him. Now, the guy who has potentially been given answers to his criticisms won't even realise that they are answers, or that they are addresses to his criticisms, because it's so far over the head of the guy criticising. Now, in this instance, it's not a quantum physicist, it's me, with my understanding and knowledge of flat Earth, versus a guy who's anti-flat Earth. But the guy who's anti-flat Earth is so far away from understanding any of the arguments, not just my flat Earth position, but his own globe position, that every single rebuttal's gone so far over his head that it has to be repeated because he simply doesn't understand it. I think that was what Rebel was driving at in a much more concise way, unless I'm completely mistaken, Rebel.
Yeah, but that's a bad comparison.
Rebel.
Quantum mechanics, that's so far advanced. We're talking about flat Earth and things that we observe every day. Everybody, you can't have gas pressure out of a container. What's so hard about that?
Okay.
They're not following it. That's the point.
Saying.
Go on, Rebel.
The point, yeah, you thought that it is a debate. They call it a debate, although I doubt they ever attended a formal debate, because what I saw, Nathan and Patrick came with bazookas and automatic machine guns to the fight, and these guys came with like baseball bats. You shot them right in the ass from the first minute on, and then it was just like, oh, okay, guys, let's not fight. We all want to find out. So it was two different mentalities clashed together, and it was just a shit show. So yeah, you guys completely talked over their heads. Like when he pulled out with Pontchartrain Lake photo, I just gasped. I'm like, there's no way. These guys talking completely two different languages.
Right.
So yeah, I wouldn't even call
saying.
it a debate. It was just a shit show.
Have you seen Zoolander? There's a very comedic improvised line by Adam Sandler where he accidentally repeats the last line, but it's so amusing. Basically, if you've not seen Zoolander, the Adam Sandler... Is it Adam Sandler? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Ben Stiller.
Ben Stiller, my bad.
But-
And they're very similar. Anyway, the Ben Stiller character in Zoolander is a model who's
All
dumb.
Jews.
and he's been MK Ultra'd into being a hitman. And they're at a grave of whoever with another ex-model who is also trained to be a hitman, but has broken the programming, and it's whatever his name is, not Mulder, is it Mulder or Scully? I forget, whatever the male character from X-Files is. Anyway, he's explaining to the Zoolander character, the Ben Stiller character, why they chose models to be assassins. So he talks through how they're super fit, they can fit in easily into crowded scenes without, causing any fuss, etc., etc. So he goes through the whole rigmarole of explaining why they use models. And after he's finished the full explanation, the Zoolander character just turns to him and says, well, but why models? After he's just gone through the full explanation. Now, in reality, it was just an accident. He just repeated the previous line. But what the the guy from X-Files does is he says, I just explained it to you, just then, 10 seconds ago. Because he's in disbelief that the guy hasn't managed to absorb a very concise and detailed explanation for why they use models as assassins. Now, in the case of me and Patrick, we're taking them by the hand and explaining them why you use this maths for your claim. It's not, it's just baby steps that we're having to take them through. And at the end of it, they're like, yeah, but why this maths? Or, but why should we address this in any way? Let's move on. Or, they're just, it's so over their heads. It's untrue. Just talking a different language is a good way of putting it.
I understand what you're saying. You're absolutely right. It is just going right over their heads. How many times you had to say the not actual size of the not actual sun, and they're still not getting it? So I guess you're right.
Dude, they were looking away all embarrassed because they were trying to follow it, but they caught on with themselves that they were not able to grasp it. I could literally see it on their faces. And Josh went all sweaty even from that.
Yeah. You can see Dave was very uncomfortable because I think he experienced what we call cognitive pain.
Yes.
He didn't really. I don't think he understood what he was experiencing, but it was a subconscious thing going on.
Oh, most
to the point that
assuredly.
he had to mute you. Yeah.
Very, very accurate. Yes,
It's so
absolutely.
bad.
Cognitive
I
pain
knew
was what
David
he was
for a long
experiencing
time.
in that moment. You're not wrong.
Finish
Too
on.
bad.
Rebel, hang on. Finish on. You knew David for a long time. Were you a follower of his?
Yeah. He's actually producing quite an amazing work on, all the conspiracies, the secret societies, and how this world came about. He's a very good investigator, like one of the best.
I'm
But
glad
when
you
it comes
said
to
that.
flat Earth,
Oh, you said how this world came
Guys,
about?
can you stop talking through Rebel? Try that again, Rebel. We'll hopefully get you to the end of a sentence.
no worries. No, I was just saying that I followed David for a long time, since probably very beginning. And he's a very good investigator into things like pharmaceuticals, the World Banks, wars, the conspiracies. Like his work is very excellent. Like I would encourage you guys to get familiar with his work. But when it comes to flat Earth, unfortunately, like many people, it's just they blindsided. It's like the term I use is poison box of inverted pyramid. Although they're investigating a different pyramid of knowledge, when they look at the nature of the world, they assume it's all solved. There's no conspiracy. There's no need for conspiracy. There's no need for confusion. It's all solved. And when somebody like Nathan comes about and talks the way Nathan talks, right, it completely flies over their heads.
Can I ask you a
Although
question
subconsciously. Go ahead.
Is that okay, Ned?
Yeah, go ahead.
So you're saying about this David guy, and you've watched him. Can you explain them why somebody who's very diligent, thorough, and researched in one field goes into another field to challenge a person having got what sounds like similar skills to Nathan in different fields, but then comes into this arena completely unresearched.
I can answer that. Unless you want to answer that, Rebel. Unless you can, it's speculation for both of us, but do you want to answer that?
Yeah, I can. From my point of view, one person can only do so much, right? We only have so much brain capacity and focus. The field of focus that he decided to investigate has very little to do with the nature of the reality. At some point it may, connect and whatnot. Yeah, so it's like the conspiracies and the truth he's investigating will remain as such, regardless whether the shape of the Earth is flat or round. So to his mind, it's kind of irrelevant. Okay, go ahead.
I'm asking why.
You asked me what I think. So.
Yeah, but I think you're missing the point I made. I'm asking why. To say he's only got so much space in his brain to research certain things properly just seems incorrect.
It
just doesn't seem logical that somebody that intelligent, supposedly that well researched, go into a debate on something they haven't researched. Is it just arrogance that they think they've researched this?
No. I think what we were lucky enough to find when we first started looking through this subject, or what we thought we were lucky enough to find, it was actually Feast of Nonsense, was uncensored information. We could find our way to other people and find our way through, in the reasonably true sense of the word, flat Earth. Now, for a lot of people, their path is very different to ours. It runs alongside it. It's parallel with our path, but it isn't the same path. And that's the anti-flat Earth path. So I don't disbelieve him when he says, I've been looking into this since 2014. What you will be led to believe you're researching as you research, quote, flat Earth and search for it, isn't flat Earth. You're researching anti-flat Earth rhetoric, anti-flat Earth behaviour, and he echoed all of them. All of the sentiments of an anti-flat earther. So I don't disbelieve that he's been on the road for research, but his road for research has been cobbled long before he got there, and it's directed him in a certain way. So it's not ignorance, he just hasn't been allowed to become proficient in the opponent's argument. Because if people are censored from us, when they do come across us, that actually works massively to our advantage. With a hand at Mona Lisa's skirt. We're a surprise, because they haven't managed to find their way to us if we've been heavily censored. So what do you find? Well, they haven't studied our argument well enough to defeat us when they're actually in front of us, as you saw. They didn't know their ass from their elbow when it came to our arguments. What's the first thing you should do if you're going to enter into a debate? And I think this is Adam's point. You should become proficient enough to be able to argue for your opponent, on your opponent's side. In other words, for me to become a skilled globe detractor, I've got to be able to fight for the globe. Like Baldwin, right? That's what you've got to be able to do. Well, could any of them do that? Could any of them, what's the word? Strongman or something? There's a word for it. I've forgotten what it's called. But
strong arm?
Steel arm? Steel man? Steel man?
No.
Steel man.
Steel man,
Let me
that's
ask
the
you a
one.
question.
Knew someone would come up with it. Steel man. Right? A steel man the position. Well, they haven't got the opportunity to do that if they can't find their way to us. Now, when it was very telling when he said, yeah, I saw you discussing something with Red. Excuse me. To my knowledge, I can't remember if Reds and I have actually spoken ever. I can't actually remember. It's been so many years, 8 years in this subject now. But it's not like there's been many, many discussions. But I'm sure Reds has talked about me plenty. So when he dropped into the conversation, yeah, I've heard the discussions with you and Reds, or words to that effect. I'm like, well, number one, there hasn't been any actual discussions between us. It's just him talking about me, which means you're watching him talk about me. That's where he gets his knowledge from about the subject. Places like Soundly and Reds, right? That was his source information, right? So what does that mean? It means he's not looking at the actual flat earth arguments. They're hidden from him. Well, take that knowledge under your belt. Know that when you go out there to places like this, that what I'm trying to get across to people when I say I want to cover the more mainstream stuff rather than people like Simon Dan and Dave McKeegan or Ruhif, You know, these are the people I don't want to be covering because they're in the same pool. Well, that would be David and Josh, very much are not in this pool. They're not anti-flat earthers, but when they've done their due diligence, they've been researching what they've been presented is flat earth, and it isn't. But that definitely worked to my advantage, as you all saw.
So what you're saying
Well,
is it's like, hold on. So what you're saying is it's like a professional boxer like Mike Tyson, just waiting in the ring, and some amateur just comes in unprepared and gets in the ring with Mike Tyson. How do you think that's going to turn out? It's the same way that debate did.
But it comes down to, there's a couple of factors I would like to throw in. It comes down to who this guy Dave and Josh, these guys are placing their trust in. Like, if you notice, they shared Red's rhetoric stuff and they shared Soundly stuff. Where are the two of them from? I'm pretty sure both of them are from Florida, right? So the chances are that they were behind feeding these guys information. But it doesn't matter. The point is that this guy Dave and Josh, the two of them, didn't show enough respect to the real topic, because they have it in their head that it's a conspiracy theory and that the globe earth is a fact. Because the opposite side of that would be that the flat earth is a fact and the globe earth and heliocentrism is a religious cult. So that is the point they don't want to get to, questioning whether they are involved in the religious cult or not. They don't want to get to that point. So it's easier for them to believe that the flat earth is just some conspiracy and Nathan is just some crazy conspiracy theorist. But then they are stuck in a position where they're being fed all this absolutely useless information by whoever, right, that came from Red's rhetoric and Soundly, and it's not doing them any good against Nathan and Patrick, who are coming at them with geometric fact. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think you're right, Brian, because he's a conspiracy guy. You're right.
I'd like to comment as well. Is Adam still here? I really liked what he was saying.
Yeah, man.
Okay, so let me summarize what you were saying before I make my point. You were saying that if you're going to be a researcher and go and study other conspiracies on many different, topics and matters, the logic you use for that should be the logic you use for this. That was your point, but he wasn't. Am I right?
Yeah, until Nathan's saying, it sounds to me like there's so much confirmation bias out there for people looking into this that all they'll wander into is confirmation that they were right in the first place and flat earthers are stupid, even if they're doing a bit of diligence, because the diligence they're coming across or can only come across is people like Reds.
Right. So I tried to work Neil's boxing analogy. Let's say you've got Bruce Lee, and every time Bruce Lee goes to the boxing ring, they say, you can only play by our rules. You can only box. You've got to wear gloves. You've got to use your standard footwork. And if you don't, we're going to stop you and correct you. So he gets in the ring, doesn't do particularly well with just his boxing gloves on. This is Bruce Lee. And everybody around the ring berates him. He's got no support around him. They all chuck stuff at him while he's there, stop him every time he gets the footwork wrong, and then declare victory at the end, right? So that's how they perceive the bout. They then go and tell next man, yeah, Bruce Lee, what a useless twat. Yeah, you just need to know this. You just need to know how to box in this way and how to do this footwork, and you'll be fine. He's a complete useless idiot. They go, all right, brilliant, well prepped. So then they go, okay, we'll meet you over here, Bruce Lee, over on this field. Bruce Lee goes, okay, no worries. They get to the field, and what do you think Bruce Lee does? Beats the living crap out of them, right? But they weren't aware that he can use his feet. Well, I didn't know he was going to kick me in the head with a roundhouse. I didn't know he could jump over the top of me and do a somersault. I didn't know he could do any of those things. Yeah, it's because those things that he was doing were hidden from you. You didn't get to see him doing those things in his dojo, did you? Because you were shown the boxing match with him cobbled only. And that was all that you were allowed to be seen, talked about. That was the only thing that was permitted. So every step of your research only showed you those things. What you didn't realise was somewhere else that you're being shielded from. This is anti-flat earthers like Josh and David. There's another area where there's people doing kung fu compared to your boxing. And believe me, it's very, very effective when it's let loose. As opposed to just being fed your information from the side that's basically saying we're idiots. That's the other thing. If you're going to watch Soundly, Red Rhetoric, Simon, what's their main theme? Their main attack format? Ad hominem. What's the main theme of their ad hominem? They're stupid. So the overriding impression, if your research is to go to Red Rhetoric or to go to Simon Dan or to go to Dave McKeegan, look how stupid these people are. Do you want to assess the stupidity level of the people that might be projecting out their own stupidity? Because while they might say we're stupid, all that does is numb you into a false sense of security. That same false sense of security that left Dave in severe cognitive pain when he got hit in the head with a roundhouse kick. Because he didn't know there was a roundhouse kick coming his way, did he? That's what happens when you trust people that you're going to be dealing with an idiot. Oh, were you? Oh, well, you need your mute button when you find you've got a roundhouse kick coming to your head.
There's one other point that I want to add in regards to David. So there's a degree of conflict of interest that plays also, meaning that when I learned about him many years ago, he and I were both into UFO extraterrestrial research and all the conspiracies about space and visitors and blah, blah, blah. So his worldview kind of remained as such, and I think to this degree, to this day as well, although he branched his research into other things. But, he put a lot of effort and time and basically made his name in that sphere. So when I say conflict of interest, for him to even comprehend or to take the research seriously regarding the nature of the world would mean, right, he spent so many years not only wasting his time, but convincing other people of the reality of the UFOs and worlds from outer space and whatnot. And that's what I mean by cognitive pain, right? It went directly in conflict with his asserted worldview for many years. So, yeah, you guys spoke completely different languages. That's once. And the second point is that it was a conflict of interest to begin with.
Well, I'm hearing the same thing from Scientologists in regards to the degree of shame that they feel in regards to misleading others. So the guy that we covered recently who had Michelle Thaler, I believe, on, or someone like that, Andrew Gold, does a lot on Scientology. And he interviewed an ex-Scientologist who described not being able to tell a soul about leaving and then leaving his wife and daughter in a community that he put them in. And he talked about the shame he felt as a result of that, especially as they're now being given scripts to talk about how he was a complete shit. It's like, well, the question from Andrew Gold's like, well, how does that make you feel? And he's like, well, crappy, obviously. But also a certain degree of shame because it's me who put them in that position. Well, likewise with David, if he's telling people about alternatives, let's say he's, just because I don't know his narratives, but I'll just steal one from David Icke and say, no, the moon's not a rock in the sky, it's a spaceship full of aliens. It's a base. Well, you've taken one narrative, spun in a new conspiracy, which leaves you without the space conspiracy, and therefore NASA are still liars, which runs on a parallel with us. But ultimately, because there's still space, it's just a different version of space that they've lied about. It's the same thing with Joe Rogan. I can't remember who he was talking about this with, but he was talking about the idea that there's a dark side of the moon alien space base that was being hidden from the public, so hence they had to fake the moon landings. That's why they all look so crappy. Because they were really going to the other side of the... Well, if you've peddled that, and someone says, no, the whole thing is a lie, space itself is fake, you've got, as you described, Rebel, a vested interest in describing your conspiracy that still includes space. So you want to retain space. I mean, that's a bit far, especially as I've got a conspiracy that hinges on the idea that NASA have lied about what space is, and my idea about what space is, the replacement for it, and still include space. Well, that's half the time why these people become more popular. Doesn't matter that they're getting it wrong or disagreeing with whatever they say the sky vacuum is, because there's still a sky vacuum in his conspiracy. Well, that's perfectly acceptable. It still begs the question that there's a space for gas to fill that isn't filling it. Oh, well then fine. Until a flat earther comes along and says, nah, the whole thing's a lie. Including, but not limited to, NASA and your bullshit about the moon being a space base. All of it's a lie. There wasn't some conspiracy to hide the moon base. Just space wasn't ever real. There's not some alternative that you can reposition in that area that isn't real. Space, that is. So tough luck. Suck it up. Yeah, you may have deceived people. You may have to say, look, for all those people I told my alternative narrative within the space framework of heliocentrism, I was wrong. Yeah, have some humility. That's what it's all about. You might have some introspection after that, which will do you good.
Well,
But
the
that's
thing
the
about
problem.
It'd
They
be
have
too
no
difficult.
humility.
Maybe a parallel would be to say it's as easy to accept that as to accept that your parents aren't really your parents. Right? It's for some people they will never accept it. Just too painful.
I still have to finish
Just too
my
painful,
point.
yes.
Go ahead, Tenth.
Thank you. All this extra information from Rebel is fantastic on David. At the end of the video debate with Chronicles, David referenced a quotation. Do you remember that one? From a religious
do.
person.
a guy who got burned at the stake because he said there was infinite worlds or some nonsense like that.
Yep.
Yes. Now that is what I want to talk about, because he quoted a religious person or a religious quotation in the context of being burnt at the stake for saying what David doesn't want to give up exists. That's why he did that. Okay. So anytime you show someone like that, that space is fake, that's the cognitive dissonance that Rebel saw and we all saw on his face. It just got deeper today because we understand that David is a very good researcher on other conspiracies, except flat Earth, of course. Now, the point I want to bring is that there are subcategories of lies that have shelf life, and that shelf life has an expiration date, and they don't mind those things being outed out and expiring as long as the main one doesn't get challenged. If you follow where I'm going, I would say the government, people are realizing how bad the governments have lied to them throughout the years, more today than ever before, because of the internet and, contradictions in stories and political speech, which isn't true at all. Then you've got the medical, pharmaceutical. We've all seen that. Then you've got corporations and how they work. We all seen that. Then you got the media. These are expiration. They can be outed. They can be, people can get fired, another replacement. These can go away, but don't touch the root. What's the root? Either nature created everything or a creator created everything. And
That's right.
And so when that's the root and you got to protect that, you have the biggest lie, which is outer space and the whole heliocentrism. That can never be outed yet. And I say yet because it's got a final expiration date too. They haven't made the final play where they need that background to be real. That story has to remain real for their next big play. So they'll sacrifice all the other things, the subcategories within the big lie, because they got expiration dates. It doesn't matter. It's not going to affect their future plans.
Quick shout out to Skeptic936 who says share. Thank you very much for the super chat, Skeptic936.
Please weigh in.
Also, One Deck, can you mute, please? And Godzilla37 says, hi, Skeptic. Thank you very much, both of you, for the super chat.
Yeah, well, I think it's just basically people like David and Josh are, what they're trying to be smart about it, they're just flat scared. That's about it. They just don't want to accept.
Yeah, but that I agree with you. But for reasons
they're
that
wrong.
Ken just said, I think. That's why
But
they're
David
flat
and
scale.
but David and Josh aren't. I mean, David and Josh are just a couple of guys who believe in things that they believe in. I mean, you can go down that road of UFOs and aliens and all the rest of it, and it all leads back to some kind of heliocentrism. Now, I mean, it doesn't have to lead back there, but they've made it lead back there. So now they're stuck with these things, all these claims they made over the years, and all this conspiracy that they believe in that can all be just taken apart if the Earth is not a globe. It just takes it all apart. And
That's my point.
They're scared. They're scared of that.
Nobody
No,
is
that's my point.
nobody's
Hang
infallible,
on.
and nobody's going to hold it against you if you get something wrong, right? For number one, the entire Western world has been deceived into thinking that the space above their head is a vacuum. So when you figure out that it isn't, it's not like everyone's going to... I'm about to say something that I'm going to immediately regret saying. I was about to say, you're not going to have everybody hating you. That's not true, because everybody else around you becomes you, Josh, and you, David. And they treat you like you treated me the moment you realise it. So yeah, that's why you end up being an anti-flat earther. That's how you become an anti-flat earther. Fear of the social persecution that you'll face, some of which you've dished out, right? Some of it might be guilt, like with refracted curvature, our John. Same thing, right? The amount of persecution you dole out to other people because they're dumb flat earthers, when you suddenly realise how right they are, yeah, you just have to have some humility. Suck it up.
Nathan, that was my whole point, because what Adam said triggered my thinking. What Adam said is that it would be very logical to assume, and reasonable, very reasonable to assume, that a researcher would take the cognitive prowess into any field they're going to go research. And because of confirmation bias of these two guys, it's okay on the other fields. It seems to be working fine, according to Rebel. He's spot on this, and he's spot on this. But when it came to this subject, the confirmation bias wouldn't allow it. And this is what's happening when we talk to our families and friends. And this is what needs to be addressed, is that we bring logic and reason and their own claims of their own sphere Earth to them. We say, this is what it says. This is your position. And in that position, you fail. You can't orchestrate this with any reasonable proof. The limitation of the geometric horizon is set in stone. And you can't defend it. But your confirmation bias kicks in. Why? Why here and not on all the other things that you shine?
Well, if I was the lad David, I'd be angry right now, because I made myself look really bad. So I'd either be angry at myself for believing that I could just waltz into this situation with my friend Josh and just take on two people who are obviously very adept in the topic, in the subject. Or I'd be very angry at the people who talked me into doing it, which is very likely that the two of them were talked into doing this by other people in the background, the people feeding them information and tactics. Whoever they were, it doesn't matter who they were. Those people that weren't in the foreground, those people's reputations didn't change. But the lad David and Josh, whatever reputation they had within their community on Rumble, that is definitely tarnished now. You know, you can't deny it. So if they walked in there themselves off their own bat and just went looking for information from other people, then they did it themselves. But if they were talked into it, then I'd be very angry at the people who talked me into it, because those people didn't have their faces on camera, and those people didn't have their reputations tarnished on a platform, on YouTube also, on more than one platform.
Well, maybe so, Brian, but that's not the point. In fact, that emphasizes my point even greater. Maybe so, but here's the deal. You went into all the other topics that Rebel gave you credit for and said, I've been following this guy and he's really spot on all these things. So now he comes into this topic and he forgets about his discipline. He forgets about what he did research when he went to other debates. He just left that and watched Hang on. So all he did was watch other people's videos and parroted them. Did he do that with all the other subjects that he's supposed to be really spot on and good? Does he parrot everything, or just this did he parrot? The
Maybe,
whole
but
point.
His credibility is going to have to wait for a second. You know, yes, what you're saying is this is a reflection on, well, did he do that with everything? Is he wrong about all of it? Well, you know, that's for his audience to question, you know. But Skeptic936 just sent me more money in response to Godzilla saying hello to him. So thank you very much for the super chat, Godzilla936. Also, JMails24 says 4 more hours. Second time's a charm. Thank you very much for the super chat. Really appreciate the support. Also, Retro Bell, who says, looking forward to an FEG treatment of future Simon Dan treatment of QE's recent treatment of Nathan's debate. Yeah, like with Dave McKeegan yesterday, when it comes to people's response to my response to their original video, nah, definitely not. It gets too complicated. But I will, you know, refer people back to the response. It's like, yeah, we asked for distance to the sun daily, and it's the same as distance to the moon. It still relies on the same exact principles of Kepler's third law and Huygens' assumptions of Venus having the same R as Earth that's assumed to have an R that can't be measured by Al-Biruni. All of those things we cover daily can just go back to Dave McKeegan without me even watching his video, if I'm actually honest. I haven't watched it because I know there's nothing in what he'll have to say 8 years into this subject. You know, and from what Gene told us yesterday, his answer was, well, it looks far away, or words to that effect. Yeah, we understand your argument better than you do. You're playing tiddlywinks while we're playing chess.
Can I wrap up my argument?
You can, but I just want to shout out the last super chat from Skeptic936, who says, let's just spin down, who says, triple tens, jackpot, ding, ding, ding. Thank you very much for the super chats. Really appreciate all the support, guys. Thank you so much.
Skep is ace.
Adam, go ahead, because I'll wrap
It's
up.
on the
that
same,
thing.
yeah, it's on the same thing, Tent. It's more of a, just in terms of these reviews. In all of this, I've got a request if you would ask Patrick, Nathan. Would he be willing to come on the show and just discuss his experience with us? Now, that I think would be quite enlightening. He seems quite a considered man who's sat in both the camps. And I'd just like to hear his viewpoint on what went off there.
I second that.
Yeah, it'd be good to have him on the show and actually just talk about our experience, because I've not really talked to him afterwards. I thanked him for my time there, and you know, 1 or 2 minor comments aside, I haven't just dissected it with him or talked about or reflected on it since. So yeah, it'd be nice to have him on and actually do that with the public if he's willing. I'll ask him.
Okay.
Cool.
Adam, I'd like for you to go with me on this one, because I'm going to call on you for a couple of backups. When we as Christians cite the Bible, and then we go to a fellowship or a church that says they believe in the Bible, and we go for a little while, and then the sermon happens to land on a particular scripture, and then we hear something that's not the same. We say, well, that's not what I read out of my Bible, but well, why did the pastor say those things? That's not there. So you make an appointment, you go to the pastor and say, I'd like to know how you got this out of this. And if you can't come to terms, you leave that church because that person's not representing the Bible correctly. That's all you do, because you already got the text. He's supposed to be going off the text, but you went off so far off the text that you can't see eye to eye. And this is how, when there's a difference of interpretation or whatever, you have church splits or whatever. Okay, that's been the norm. Now, what I find today is that scientism, as C.S. Lewis predicted, will invade, and it has. And it's in the pulpits. And we got good pastors who are reading the Bible, doing all the same thing like this David guy did, real spot on. But then when it comes to heliocentrism or geocentrism, all of a sudden it changes. So make an appointment, go see the pastor and say, wait a minute, the Bible is a geocentric book. There's no references of anything heliocentric related in the Bible. Where in the world, like the guy at the stake who was burning at the end of your debate, where in the world could a guy who's being burned for being religious, where did he get from a geocentric book other worlds? Infinite worlds. Where did he get that? That's his philosophy, maybe. That's what he's thinking, maybe. But that's not in the Bible. And so my thing is real simple. It's like scientism has come in much like the suitcase that we did in the pre-show. They use the scientific method, empirical, cause of things happening. Your opinion doesn't count. A, B, all that stuff that we go through. And then they lay there, say, okay, we got everyone knowing this is true method to study cause and effect when it's happening in nature. Now let's dress it up in another suitcase and bring in our pseudoscience and have that badge and take that all the way to the bank, even though we got nothing to prove what we're doing. And so this is what I'm seeing, and this is where my interest is in flat Earth, is to get as much knowledge on the arguments so that I could go with others that are teamed up with me and show that scientism is not science, and the church should have nothing to do with scientism. And we can already go to the scriptures and know it's geocentric and not heliocentric. So why would there be a quotation of any heliocentric statement be attributed to the Bible? Adam, what do you got to say?
I think
if you're referring
If
to
I
the
was-
book to
if I
gather
was in-
knowledge, we are back to square one. We have to be made sure by ourselves, right? But the one thing I want to round up about
but you can come in afterwards.
Hold on, let's just hear him. I'm sorry, Adam. I know you had something to answer.
so good.
Go ahead, Rebel.
no, I was just saying, to 10th point, if we are referring to the book to gather knowledge, then we are back to square one. I would rather us to actually verify everything that's going on ourselves. But one more point I want to add regards to David. I don't think everything is lost. I don't know if you remember the way he rounded up the show is to say, he's willing to do experiments. He was willing to, or rather observations. He's willing to meet up. So I think he does have an open mind. He doesn't have all the necessary information and the way we think about these things kind of nailed down yet. So I think he'll turn around. He'll come around eventually.
I'd have to disagree with you there, Rebel, because he's
You do it.
completely looking past the
Before you
fact
do.
that this topic has.
Before you do, can Adam get his last word in? I've got a word to say to the audience.
Okay.
We are going to stay live a bit longer, but I'm going to explain why on camera. But go ahead, Adam.
Brian's welcome to finish. But I'll just address 10's point, because if that was me going to speak to the pastor, I don't just rock up after the seminar and start challenging him. I'd go away and I'd do considered research to address the point he's making. I wouldn't be just listening to his seminars. I'd go outside, I'd read the texts myself and form my own conclusions. I'd read other people's. I'd seek opposite opinion before then going and challenging this guy to discuss it. And that's fundamentally the point. We've made excuses, Nathan, you have, with regards to, he's gone to Reds and that's enough. It doesn't appear to be, certainly not my standards, and it's not the standards that Rebel was describing that he applies elsewhere. I don't want to make an excuse why. The only thing I can think is arrogance. Generally, they firmly believe and don't need to research is the only thing I can think that's going off in these people's heads. To the point that he's debating you. How much research do you need? Just go and listen to the housekeeping questions and attempt them. But there was nothing of that level of ability or effort put in. And that's what I found confusing when Rebel mentioned that he had respect for this guy and his quality elsewhere.
Fair enough. What I'm going to say is typically this would be where I'd round out the live show, but I want to actually stress the computer. So I've just actually managed to get a 4-month-old computer, strictly speaking, to work properly and cool itself properly, which means it's running much more fast, which means that I'll need to tune it in a bit more detail, like I did when I first got it, which is fine. But I want to do that with the most stress on the computer possible, so I'll actually stay live. So I am going to say a huge, massive, enormous thank you to both Discord and G+ Panels for making today's live show possible. And of course, a massive thank you to all of you for smashing the super chat, liking, commenting, sharing, subscribing, joining as a member, if you were gifted one. And massive thank you to Godzilla for gifting out those memberships and all that good stuff. But I'm not going to run an outro, and I'm not going to cut off the live show. But should the show actually crash, because I'm going to be stressing it, but with a bit of powerful software, and by powerful software I mean a game, then it means that at least I've done an outro and actually thanked you for smashing the super chat, and thank the panel for making the show possible, because it did actually crash during yesterday's Uncut and After show. But like I say, I am actually just going to pass back to the panel now and say, yeah, we're going to stay live for a bit longer while I try and force the computer to crash. But yeah, at least it means there has been an outro of sorts, should that happen. So yeah, that's my little bit, but we're going to stay live if that's all good by you guys. Plus, I can't remember who it was. I think it was Retro Bill said 4 more hours. It won't be, but it will be until I can force the computer to crash. And if it doesn't, then I'll just do a proper outro again. So there we go. We're still live.
Well, before you fade
can I
into, before you
to Rebel then?
You can.
before you fade
Brian.
into,
Yeah, then 10th. Unless Brian gets a response from Rebel, which you may.
I'll be quick, Brian.
Okay, go ahead, Tom.
Okay, then you go ahead.
Nathan, before you fade into the sun fade, 156 people watching right now.
That's a new record. Shout out to Godzilla. He says, Nathan just DM'd me, guys. He said an extra hour for every $5 super chat. No, I didn't, Godzilla, but thank you very much for the super chat. Really, really appreciate the support. Been loads of super
He'll
chats
do half an hour for €2.
Look, I'm going to go until the computer crashes. And if it doesn't crash, I'm just going to celebrate the fact that under the maximum stress I can put the computer on, and with 150 people watching, the computer now can sit in this corner and be ignored for 5 years. Hopefully, fingers crossed.
Well, just to keep it on track, I'm going to go with my response to Rebel. Well, now, Rebel, I could be wrong, right? So I'm not trying to say that I'm right and you're wrong, because I can't see the future. But from what I could gather from this lad David, more than Josh, right, was that David was wanting to go out and do all these things. Like, not taking into account that it's been 8 or 9 years of this. 9 years for Betty, 8 years for me, Nathan, Adam, maybe, Arwen, I'm not sure. So we've been at this for years, and all these things have already been done. So he's not even addressing the fact that the horizon, he hasn't gone anywhere near the fact that the horizon's not a physical geometric location yet. He hasn't gotten to that yet. He's years behind because he wants to go out and do a load of things that, what I see is that he's going to go out and he's going to do either one of two things. One, he's going to go out and he's not going to see what he expects to see. And he's either going to accept that what he's seeing is not possible on a globe, right? Because that's going to be the initial thing that's going to happen with him. Or he's going to come up with some excuse like some 7 over or greater than 7 over 6 or to try and explain away things. And he's going to go out and do 10 different observations. And he's going to choose the one of those 10 that fits the narrative he wants it to fit. And he's going to use that as some kind of a globe proof. Because that's what all these other people like Soundly and Red's Rhetoric and all them, they go out 10 times and more. And they just pick, that's what they did for years. They just picked that one time that suited their narrative. That's why never, and Anthony Riley was the first person to say this, and I 100% agree with him. Never ever do you see anything did we ever see anything from the globe side, that any observation that ever went against them. Yet from our side, we showed everything. Everything we found, we showed, right? But they showed only one thing every time, giving the impression that every time you go out to whatever part of the world and you look out over the ocean, you see this thing every day. You don't. Every day you go out, it's different. It's never the same. It's constantly changing. The horizon's not a physical geometric location. Things are different every day because it's a different world every day. Things are not constant like they need to be on a globe. And I reckon my personal thoughts is that that's what this lad David is going to try to do. He's going to get to that point where it's either crunch time, it's either accept that he's wrong or do 10 observations and pick one as your confirmation bias. That's what I think he'll do. I could be wrong. I hope I am.
Do you not agree with my assessment that it's just been led that way by the search algorithms in Google and YouTube and various other places.
Well, I mean, I can't say that's wrong. I obviously don't know. I can't say that's wrong, but I think he's been in communication with people who already have a bias. I put it this way. I think there's 4 levels of flat scale. There's the ordinary person who won't even address it. They just smirk as if it's not even a thing. There's the people like David and Josh who are gone past that point, who look into things like conspiracies and think flat earth is a conspiracy when it's not. And they listen to people who are on the level 3, because they're level 2. The ordinary person's level 1. David and Josh are level 2. Then there's level 3, which is like soundly in rhetoric. And level 2 people listen to them. And then you have level 4, which are the people over on BEVs. So you have all these people who won't just accept reality. And that's what's going on. And that's how I view it. And I think if you're at level 2, you'll either escape from all levels and just accept it, or you'll end up going down to level 3. Or if you maybe might make it to level 4, but that still doesn't solve the problem for you.
Right.
You might be right, because I think it's too much at stake. Their reputation is at stake, at least in their mind, right? To side with flat Earth. So there's going to be a lot of cognitive pain. There's going to be a lot of decisions that they have to make. And ultimately, you might be right. Ultimately, they'll decide not to jeopardize their reputation. But the second point is, although he may have said that he looked into it since 14, 15, I don't think he meant it in the way that we actually heard it. I think he was just aware of it, that thing is going on since 2014. I doubt he actually looked into it. He was at the level 1 primarily, I think, for all those years. It just smirks at it and dismisses it out of hand. So, but you may be right in terms of him remaining anti-flat earther. The one thing I'm going to point out is
Hang on,
observation.
Rebel, I want to challenge you there, please. He said he's been looking at it before I even looked at it. And he did conspiracy videos on all subjects.
Why does Tim Fan interrupt people?
I asked for permission. Who's this guy?
No,
Yeah, relax there, buddy. That's 10.
you do.
Why don't you ask for
what
permission
you
and you can
always-
interrupt me?
Complain about. The man
Oh,
was in the middle. What's good?
he wasn't in the
goose
middle.
is
He was rounding
Good
off.
for the gander.
Okay, I forgive you. You want to be my enemy? I forgive you in advance.
I don't think it's about that, Tent. I think that Rebel didn't get to finish his point. And that's what the man is saying.
He was round. First of all, okay.
He still had something to add in at the end.
Yeah.
So
Let me
you
just
can't
add
say
one
it.
more
If someone
thing.
says to you,
Okay,
look,
both
let's
of
be
you
honest,
stop.
just
Just
be
let
fair,
him
you
go.
can't say
We can end this now. Go ahead, Rebel.
Yeah, let's just end this now. So the only thing that I'm thinking is that he was willing to do it with flat earthers. And that's a big difference when somebody on the panel compared it to Adam, I think, to every other, like Soundly and Rhetoric, when they do it whilst in the midst of like-minded people, which of course emphasizes confirmation bias. So I think that's where Dave's actually differs. He says, let's go together, right? And to me, that's a man with an open mind. Right? That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, and I want to challenge all that because he's into conspiracies, and this is the biggest one, and he knew it in 2014. So he just put it on the shelf, went to the other conspiracies, left this one there, the big one, the one that gets a bunch of views if you make videos against it, as Dave McKeegan found out when he's doing other subjects and he decided to flirt with flat earth, debunking it, and all of a sudden his views jump up to hundreds of thousands. So he's seeing all the other ones. He sees this one since 2014 and doesn't do anything until now. Yeah, I want to challenge all that.
Yeah, so
I got
remember 2014, we had very little going on for Flat Earth, meaning the information wasn't readily available. There wasn't as much research, if any, available. So, I mean, it's plausible that he looked into it. 2014, saw nothing and put it on the shelf. It's plausible. I'm not saying that's what happened. I'm saying 2014, there was not much on Flat Earth.
That's not what he said.
Compared
That's
to,
not what
let's
he
say,
said. That's not what he said, Rebel.
No.
He said he's been knowing about it since 2014 and gave the impression that he actually had done research, is the beginning of the video. And
well,
he also gave the
evidence
impression
was-
he also gave the impression that he didn't know what Nathan did at the pre-show. And then later said he watched videos of Nathan debating or talking to Reds, or Reds talking about Nathan. He did two things. He said, he acted like, well, what do you do, Nathan? Oh, and then I have a FED flat earth debate show. Well, he knew all that. But then later said, yeah, I know, I've heard you. And then called him a dick.
Like, I'm not disagreeing with you, Tenth. Like, man didn't do his homework. That's obvious. That's what I'm trying to
No, I'm showing
point
that
out.
I'm showing an apparent contradiction. It's not about his homework. It's about his statements of what he is aware of and not aware of that are contradicting. 2014, I didn't even get into it until the end of I believe 2017 or 2016. I can't recall. So he has all this time, but ever since I got into it, I've not only researched some of the other conspiracies that we all see, but this one's been front and center.
That's
talking about
fallacious reasoning,
Nancy.
right? You're comparing it. You're comparing David to you and to maybe people you know.
brother.
Not everybody is like this.
No, I'm not comparing David to me. I'm comparing David to his David's words.
Are you talking about Nancy?
I don't know if that's his middle name, but I'm just talking about how he says one thing, does another, and then pretends he doesn't know who Nathan is, and later says, I know, I've seen your shows. And then all of a sudden, is there so much contradiction just within David against David? It's not about me.
You ain't heard anything yet. Guess what
What?
happened last night? Okay, don't do it. It's rhetorical.
Go on.
So
Yeah.
I got everyone's attention.
No, I was going to say no football.
Yeah, that's one thing that didn't happen. So there was no football. I got done with the show late. I'll try to keep it short. Got done with the show late. Jump on